History is written in ink, but what if some chapters were deliberately erased? Beneath the surface of the well-known past lies a darker, unspoken truth, mysteries that defy explanation, events that have been buried or twisted beyond recognition. What secrets did the ancient world try to hide? What dark forces shaped the course of civilization, leaving us with more questions than answers? The truth is far from clear, and some stories are too dangerous to tell. In the heart of the ancient Near East, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers converge, lies a civilization older than most, Sumer. Here, beneath the layers of sand and time, fragments of a forgotten world remain, waiting to be understood. Among these remnants is an artifact that has confounded scholars for centuries, the Sumerian King List, a series of inscriptions, meticulously carved into stone, detailing the rulers of Sumer, their reigns, and their extraordinary lives. But there is something profoundly strange about these records. They tell the story of kings who ruled for thousands of years, figures whose reigns stretch into the realm of the impossible. How could these kings have lived for so long? Was this a mere exaggeration, a symbolic gesture of power, or is there something more beneath the surface? The Sumerian King List begins with a sweeping statement. After the flood, power was handed down to the kings of Sumer. It lists rulers who reigned for durations that are almost unimaginable by today's standards. One king, Alulim, is said to have ruled for 28,800 years. Another, Enmenlu-Ana, ruled for 43,200 years. These are not mere symbolic numbers. They are detailed with precision, written as historical fact, and they are the cornerstone of the King List. Mainstream scholars have long struggled with these figures. Some argue that they are symbolic, a way to demonstrate divine favor or eternal rule. Others suggest that these astonishing lengths of reign could reflect an ancient method of recording time that we no longer understand, where long reigns could signify the enduring legacy of a ruler, not necessarily the actual duration of their life. However, this explanation fails to resolve the enigma completely. If these kings didn't live for thousands of years, what did they mean by such extraordinary numbers? Could it be that we are missing a key piece of cultural or astronomical understanding? The Sumerians were, after all, masters of mathematics, astronomy, and architecture. Could their understanding of time and the cosmos have been so different from ours that these figures held a deeper meaning, one that modern scholars are yet to decipher? There are more peculiarities embedded within the list. As the King List progresses, the reigns of the rulers become more reasonable, more in line with what we might expect from human lifespans. But the earlier entries, those from the time before the Great Flood, remain nothing short of baffling. Was the list truly reflecting a succession of kings from a time before history as we know it? Or could it point to a time that was, quite literally, erased from our collective memory? It's worth noting that the King List's references to the flood have been echoed in many other ancient cultures, Babylonian, Hebrew, and others, suggesting that the flood, whether a literal or symbolic event, was a significant point of origin for these ancient societies. Could the extraordinary lifespans in the King List be connected to this mythic event? Is it possible that the Sumerians recorded something from an age so distant that it defies our understanding of time? Some fringe theories take the anomaly even further. Could these kings have been part of a forgotten civilization, one that existed before the flood and was lost to time? Could their reigns represent not just rulers, but entire dynasties, vast networks of governance that spanned millennia rather than individuals living in one era? Perhaps we'll never know. The Sumerian King List, like many other remnants of ancient history, holds its secrets tightly, offering just enough to spark our imagination, yet withholding the full story. And as we search for answers, we are left to wonder, what if the kings of Sumer were not merely mythic figures, but the last echoes of a civilization lost to the sands of time, one whose true history has yet to be uncovered? What remains beneath these inscriptions, hidden in the ancient texts, waiting to be discovered? As we've seen, the Sumerians were not only among the first to build cities and create written language, but they were also the architects of a complex society that seemed to spring forth almost fully formed from the earth itself. But even as their civilization left behind monumental achievements, one question lingers. Where did they come from? The land of Sumer, located in the southern region of modern-day Iraq, was once a fertile crescent nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It was here that the Sumerians built their great cities, Uruk, and Eridu, cities that would become the foundation of all subsequent Mesopotamian civilizations. Yet, as impressive as these cities were, they raise an unsettling question. How did a people, whose origins remain shrouded in mystery, come to wield such advanced knowledge and power? Archaeologists have unearthed countless artifacts, tablets, and monuments from Sumer, but the origins of the Sumerians themselves remain elusive. Their language, known as Sumerian, is not related to any known language group, which has led many to speculate that they may have arrived in Mesopotamia from elsewhere, possibly even from distant lands. But where did they come from? And why is there no trace of a migration or cultural fusion in the archaeological record? One theory suggests that the Sumerians were not native to Mesopotamia at all, but rather were a foreign people who settled in the region, bringing with them a wealth of knowledge and advanced technology. Some researchers believe they could have come from the east, from the mountains of Persia, or even further, from the lands of the Indus Valley. However, the evidence for this is circumstantial at best, and no definitive link has been established. Another, more speculative theory points to the possibility that the Sumerians could have been an entirely different type of people altogether, perhaps even an ancient, prehistoric civilization whose origins are lost to time. Some suggest that they might have descended from a long-lost culture that existed far before recorded history, a culture with knowledge far beyond what was thought possible for their time. Could they have had contact with extraterrestrial beings? This idea, though often dismissed by mainstream historians, continues to fuel fascination in certain circles. Ancient astronauts, they claim, could have visited Earth, imparting their knowledge of architecture, agriculture, and mathematics to a nascent human civilization. Even without resorting to such far-reaching theories, the question of the Sumerians' origins remains puzzling. Some believe that they may have developed independently, an isolated civilization that arose as if by some stroke of genius. But how could this be? How did a small group of people suddenly emerge with the ability to construct massive cities, develop writing, and create complex religious systems that would later influence the entire region? One of the most curious aspects of the Sumerian civilization is their religious beliefs. The Sumerians worshipped a pantheon of gods who they believed had descended from the heavens. These gods, they said, taught humanity the arts of civilization, how to cultivate the land, build cities, and create written laws. Could it be that the Sumerians themselves believed they were the descendants of divine beings, perhaps even beings from another world, as some of the ancient astronaut theorists suggest? Regardless of the origin, what is certain is that the Sumerians' legacy looms large in the annals of history. They were the first to write, the first to create laws, the first to build monumental structures that would influence civilizations for millennia. And yet, the true story of who they were and where they came from remains a mystery. The Sumerian civilization rose to prominence around 3500 BC, and for centuries, their innovations shaped the course of history. But as we examine their achievements, we must also ask, how did they come to possess such knowledge? Could it have been the result of cultural diffusion, or was it the product of something more extraordinary? The question remains unresolved, leaving us to wonder what other secrets the Sumerians might have carried with them. secrets that are lost to the sands of time. Perhaps, in the end, the most disturbing mystery surrounding the Sumerians is not just their origins, but the possibility that we may never know the full truth of where they came from or how they came to be. The answers lie buried in the past, waiting to be uncovered, or perhaps waiting to remain hidden. As we move further back in time, beyond the rise of the Sumerians and their enigmatic kings, we encounter a people whose very existence seems to have vanished without a trace: the Ubaid people. Long before the grand cities of Mesopotamia took shape, the Ubaid civilization flourished in the same fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Yet, despite their early advancements, their sudden disappearance remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in the history of ancient civilizations. The Ubaid people inhabited the region from approximately 6,500 BC to 3,800 BC, predating the rise of Sumer. Their settlements, now buried beneath the desert sands of modern-day Iraq, tell the story of a culture that thrived for centuries. Archaeological evidence reveals villages made up of simple mud brick houses, elaborate pottery, and early signs of agricultural techniques. They were among the first to establish organized communities, laying the groundwork for the later, more advanced Sumerian civilization. But then, around 3,800 BC, something unusual happened. Their culture, their cities, their very presence seemed to vanish. There is no record of their decline or collapse, no catastrophic event, no sudden invasion, no destruction of their cities. Instead, the archaeological record becomes curiously silent, as if the Ubaid people simply faded away. The question lingers: what happened to them? Mainstream scholars typically point to the gradual development of other cultures, such as the Sumerians, as a possible explanation. The Ubaid people may have assimilated into these emerging civilizations, their distinctive cultural markers absorbed into the growing Sumerian society. This theory suggests that the Ubaid simply merged into the next phase of Mesopotamian history, fading into obscurity as their way of life evolved or adapted. However, this theory doesn't fully satisfy all of the lingering questions. The Ubaid people did not simply disappear from the historical record. They left behind unique artifacts, including finely crafted pottery and symbols that have been identified as precursors to those used by the Sumerians. The shift from Ubaid to Sumerian culture is not a clear and obvious one. In fact, there is a noticeable gap, an unexplained hiatus, before the rise of Sumerian dominance. Could it be that the Ubaid were displaced or wiped out by something more dramatic than mere cultural assimilation? The location of the Ubaid settlements adds another layer of intrigue. They were situated in a region that had long been a crossroads of ancient civilizations. In this fertile land, where resources were abundant, the Ubaid people would have been vulnerable to pressures both from within and beyond their borders. Could there have been external forces at play, such as the rise of nomadic tribes or invaders from distant lands, that caused their sudden disappearance? If so, why is there no evidence of destruction? No broken walls, no skeletal remains, no signs of warfare. Then there are those who propose more speculative ideas. Some have suggested that the Ubaid people's disappearance could have been caused by a sudden environmental catastrophe, such as a series of devastating floods, a drastic shift in the region's climate, or even a famine so severe it forced them to abandon their way of life. While there is some evidence of flooding in the region, nothing definitive points to a disaster of such magnitude that would explain the sudden abandonment of entire cities. Could it have been a combination of factors, climate change, internal strife, and outside pressure, that led to their downfall? Another theory, though far more fringe, suggests that the Ubaid people might have been victims of an even more mysterious force, perhaps something beyond natural or human control. Some have speculated that the Ubaid were the victims of an unexplained event, an event that altered the course of their history in ways we still don't understand. Could it have been an encounter with something otherworldly? The idea of an alien influence is a theory often discussed in the realm of fringe history, though it remains unsupported by mainstream evidence. And yet, the question of whether the Ubaid's disappearance could be connected to forces beyond the natural world lingers, if only as a shadow of possibility. The most unsettling aspect of the Ubaid mystery is that, unlike many other ancient civilizations, there is no clear explanation for their disappearance. There are no grand tales of conquest or ruin, no city walls destroyed by fire, no inscriptions telling of their fall. The Ubaid simply seem to have vanished, perhaps absorbed into the surrounding cultures, or perhaps swallowed by some unknown force. As we reflect on this, one question stands. Did the Ubaid people truly disappear? Or is it that we, with our limited understanding of the past, simply haven't yet uncovered the truth of their fate? The story of the Ubaid people is one of the many unsolved mysteries of ancient history, leaving us to wonder what secrets lie buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be uncovered or perhaps waiting to remain hidden forever. As we journey deeper into the mysteries of ancient history, we encounter a peculiar phenomenon, a pattern that transcends borders, cultures, and even oceans. From the towering stone circles of Britain to the colossal monuments of Egypt to the forgotten megalithic ruins of South America, we find a striking similarity in the construction of enormous stone structures. These are the megaliths, massive stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, arranged with such precision and purpose that they have confounded historians, archaeologists, and engineers alike. What is it about these monuments that links cultures across the globe, cultures that, on the surface, seem entirely unconnected? In the windswept hills of England, Stonehenge stands as one of the most iconic symbols of this global megalithic coincidence. A circle of massive stones, some standing over 13 feet tall, their precise placement and alignment with the solstices has long intrigued researchers. But Stonehenge is far from unique. Across the globe, similar stone circles can be found, from the Carnac Stones in France to the sacred site of Nabta Playa in Egypt's western desert, to the mysterious ruins in the Andes of Peru. How could disparate civilizations, each with their own languages, technologies, and belief systems, come to build such similar structures? Was it simply the result of independent cultural development, or does something more profound tie these ancient peoples together? The mainstream explanation suggests that these megalithic structures were created for religious or ceremonial purposes, sites where communities gathered for rituals, astronomical observations, or marking the passage of time. The alignment of stones with celestial bodies, such as the sun, moon, and stars, suggests an advanced understanding of the cosmos, a shared human desire to connect with the heavens. But even with this explanation, there remains a question. Why, across such vast distances, did so many ancient cultures build their monuments with such similar designs, using such similar techniques? In places like the island of Easter Island, known as Rapa Nui, we find another example of this global megalithic pattern. The island's massive stone heads, known as moai, stand silently, watching the horizon. Each weighs several tons, some reaching heights of over 30 feet. The method of transport and erection of these statues remains a mystery to this day. How could an isolated society, without the benefit of modern tools or technology, create such intricate structures? Was it a sheer feat of human determination, or could there be something more at play? The questions only deepen when we consider the enormous stone blocks that make up the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, or the megalithic temples of Malta, or the stone walls of Sacsayhuaman in the highlands of Peru. These are just a few examples of the many sites where we find massive stones, each meticulously shaped and placed with no clear explanation for how they were transported or constructed with such precision. In some cases, these stones weigh as much as 100 tons, and yet the people who built them supposedly lacked the tools and technology required to move such immense blocks. Some scholars argue that these megalithic structures were constructed over long periods of time by successive generations who passed down knowledge and techniques. But this theory raises another question. How did these ancient cultures come to possess such knowledge in the first place? This is where things start to get truly speculative. A fringe theory, often discussed but rarely embraced by mainstream academia, proposes that these similar megalithic sites are evidence of a lost, advanced civilization that predates known history, perhaps one that spanned the globe. Could these structures be the remnants of a global culture, now lost to the ravages of time? And if so, what happened to this civilization? Was it destroyed in a cataclysmic event, such as a natural disaster or a global flood, as some ancient myths suggest? As we journey deeper into the mysteries of ancient history, we encounter a peculiar phenomenon, a pattern that transcends borders, cultures, and even oceans. From the towering stone circles of Britain to the colossal monuments of Egypt to the forgotten megalithic ruins of South America, we find a striking similarity in the construction of enormous stone structures. These are the megaliths, massive stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, arranged with such precision and purpose that they have confounded historians, archaeologists, and engineers alike. What is it about these monuments that links cultures across the globe, cultures that, on the surface, seem entirely unconnected? In the windswept hills of England, Stonehenge stands as one of the most iconic symbols of this global megalithic coincidence. A circle of massive stones, some standing over 13 feet tall, their precise placement and alignment with the solstices has long intrigued researchers. But Stonehenge is far from unique. Across the globe, similar stone circles can be found, from the Carnac Stones in France to the sacred site of Nabta Playa in Egypt's western desert, to the mysterious ruins in the Andes of Peru. How could disparate civilizations, each with their own languages, technologies, and belief systems, come to build such similar structures? Was it simply the result of independent cultural development, or does something more profound tie these ancient peoples together? The mainstream explanation suggests that these megalithic structures were created for religious or ceremonial purposes, sites where communities gathered for rituals, astronomical observations, or marking the passage of time. The alignment of stones with celestial bodies, such as the sun, moon, and stars, suggests an advanced understanding of the cosmos, a shared human desire to connect with the heavens. But even with this explanation, there remains a question. Why, across such vast distances, did so many ancient cultures build their monuments with such similar designs, using such similar techniques? In places like the island of Easter Island, known as Rapa Nui, we find another example of this global megalithic pattern. The island's massive stone heads, known as moai, stand silently, watching the horizon. Each weighs several tons, some reaching heights of over 30 feet. The method of transport and erection of these statues remains a mystery to this day. How could an isolated society, without the benefit of modern tools or technology, create such intricate structures? Was it a sheer feat of human determination, or could there be something more at play? The questions only deepen when we consider the enormous stone blocks that make up the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, or the megalithic temples of Malta, or the stone walls of Sacsayhuaman in the highlands of Peru. These are just a few examples of the many sites where we find massive stones, each meticulously shaped and placed, with no clear explanation for how they were transported or constructed with such precision. In some cases, these stones weigh as much as 100 tons. and yet the people who built them supposedly lacked the tools and technology required to move such immense blocks. Some scholars argue that these megalithic structures were constructed over long periods of time by successive generations who passed down knowledge and techniques. But this theory raises another question. How did these ancient cultures come to possess such knowledge in the first place? This is where things start to get truly speculative. A fringe theory, often discussed but rarely embraced by mainstream academia, proposes that these similar megalithic sites are evidence of a lost, advanced civilization that predates known history, perhaps one that spanned the globe. Could these structures be the remnants of a global culture, now lost to the ravages of time? And if so, what happened to this civilization? Was it destroyed in a cataclysmic event, such as a natural disaster or a global flood, as some ancient myths suggest? Another theory, often dismissed but no less intriguing, suggests that the ancient peoples who built these structures might have had help, perhaps from beings beyond our world. Could extraterrestrial visitors have shared their knowledge with early human civilizations, guiding them in the construction of these monumental structures? While this theory rests on shaky ground, it continues to capture the imagination of many. The megalithic coincidence challenges us to think about ancient history in a new way. What if these seemingly disparate cultures were not as isolated as we once thought? Could there have been a greater, shared human experience that connected these ancient peoples? Or is it possible that some kind of ancient knowledge, whether passed down through generations or even shared by unknown sources, spread across the globe, leaving behind a trail of monumental stones as its only legacy? The truth, like so many ancient mysteries, remains elusive. The megaliths stand as silent witnesses to a past we can only begin to understand. Whether these structures were the result of independent genius, a forgotten global civilization, or something even more extraordinary, we are left to wonder what still lies hidden beneath these stones, and what might we uncover if we were to dig just a little deeper into the mystery. As we move from the towering megaliths of ancient civilizations, we find ourselves drawn to a quiet, almost forgotten corner of history, the mysterious Vinča culture. Nestled along the banks of the Danube River in what is now modern-day Serbia and Romania, the Vinča people left behind a legacy that is as intriguing as it is elusive. Their settlements, dating back to around 5,500 BC, were among the most advanced in Europe during their time. But it is the symbols they left etched into pottery, stone, and metal that continue to stir debate and spark curiosity. The Vinča symbols are simple yet profound, abstract shapes, lines, and geometric patterns that cover an array of objects, from everyday pottery to large stone slabs. These markings, which some researchers refer to as the Vinča script, appear to be an early form of writing, though the exact meaning of these symbols remains a mystery. The marks are striking in their complexity, and their widespread occurrence suggests that they held significant importance to the people of Vinča. But what was their true purpose? Some archaeologists believe these symbols were purely decorative, ornamental designs with no deeper meaning. After all, many ancient cultures created intricate patterns in their artwork, often without any intention of encoding information. Yet, as more symbols are discovered, the patterns begin to suggest something more, something that feels deliberate, even encoded. Could these be early attempts at written language? Or were they something else entirely? Among the most fascinating of these symbols are those that seem to resemble abstract forms of communication. Some look strikingly similar to later scripts found in other parts of the world, including early forms of Sumerian and Egyptian writing. Could the Vinča people have been developing a form of writing centuries before the Sumerians, who are traditionally credited with creating the first true written language? The possibility is tantalizing. Some even speculate that the Vinča script could represent a lost proto-writing system, one that might have spread to other ancient cultures, but the lack of deciphered meaning means that, for now, the truth remains hidden. Then, there are those who argue that these symbols were more than just an early form of writing. Some researchers have suggested that the Vinča symbols may represent a form of religious or spiritual expression. The geometric patterns, often repeated in various combinations, might have been part of a ritualistic practice or a way of communicating with the divine. In a time long before the written word as we know it, could these symbols have been used in the same way we use written language today, to convey complex ideas, stories, or beliefs? Could they have been a way for the Vinča people to connect with the cosmos or with forces beyond their immediate world? But if these symbols were indeed meant to convey meaning, why do they appear to be so enigmatic? The Vinča culture was advanced for its time, with impressive craftsmanship in pottery, metallurgy, and even early urban planning. So why, despite their clear ability to communicate in other ways, did they choose to leave behind these cryptic symbols without any apparent key to unlock their meaning? Were these symbols meant for a specific group, understood only by a select few? Or were they a universal form of expression, left behind for future generations to decode? As we examine these symbols, one can't help but wonder if the Vinča people were part of a much larger, now lost network of ancient cultures. Their sophisticated artistry and apparent knowledge of geometry suggest a connection to other ancient civilizations, yet there is no clear evidence of direct contact. Could these symbols be part of a wider cultural or intellectual movement that spanned across Europe, the Near East, or even further? Did the Vinča people, with their cryptic symbols, hold the key to understanding a much broader, interconnected ancient world? Some have even raised more speculative theories. Could these symbols be a form of ancient code, a secret language passed down through generations and lost to time? Or perhaps, some believe, these markings are the remnants of a culture that had knowledge of advanced concepts, ideas we have yet to rediscover, even with our modern technologies. Could the Vinča people, with their sophisticated understanding of geometry and patterns, have had access to knowledge that was far ahead of its time? As we move further into the dark recesses of ancient history, we come upon a striking and mysterious phenomenon: burned cities, abandoned in the wake of destruction, once home to the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture. This ancient civilization, which flourished in what is now Ukraine, Moldova, and parts of Romania, existed between 5500 BC and 2750 BC. The Cucuteni-Trypillians built some of the largest known settlements of their time, with sprawling cities that covered up to 150 acres, vast urban centers, teeming with life, innovation, and culture. But among their most perplexing legacies are the many signs of deliberate, catastrophic destruction. Archaeologists have unearthed the remains of these cities, revealing patterns of recurring, violent fires, fire that seemed to sweep through entire communities, burning homes, pottery, and entire structures to the ground. The most intriguing and unsettling aspect of this destruction is the consistency with which it appears. Cities that were once vibrant and bustling seem to have been abandoned, only to be rebuilt, only to face the same fiery fate years or decades later. And then, they vanished altogether. In the heart of these ancient settlements, we find remnants of walls, foundations, and large, circular houses constructed from timber and clay. At first glance, these homes seem like any other in an ancient civilization, simple, yet capable of supporting a thriving community. But as we dig deeper, we see that many of these structures exhibit signs of scorching and intense heat. The burned remnants of pottery, charred beams, and soot-covered walls are all present, but perhaps the most striking evidence of destruction is found in the debris itself, the sudden, almost inexplicable layer of ash and fire that seems to have come from nowhere. One of the most well-documented of these burned cities is the site of Maidanets, a sprawling settlement in modern-day Ukraine. Excavations have revealed multiple layers of destruction across different levels of the settlement, each one marked by ash, soot, and the remnants of burned buildings. What is particularly unsettling is that these fires do not seem to be the result of natural causes, such as lightning strikes or wildfires, but rather appear to be a deliberate act of destruction. It's as if the people of Cucuteni-Trypillia built their cities with the understanding that they would one day burn, and perhaps even with the expectation that the cities would rise from the ashes once again. The question that arises from these findings is a simple yet unsettling one. Why were these cities destroyed so systematically? Could it have been the result of warfare? Some suggest that invading groups, perhaps rival tribes or neighboring cultures, could have burned these cities to the ground as part of a broader pattern of conquest. But there is little evidence to support this theory. No signs of large-scale conflict, such as battle wounds or defensive fortifications, have been found. The cities seem to have been abandoned before they were burned, suggesting a more complex explanation. Another theory posits that the Cucuteni-Trypillians may have engaged in a form of ritualistic destruction, perhaps as part of a cyclical process of renewal or to mark the end of one phase and the beginning of another. The repeated cycle of destruction and rebuilding could have been seen as necessary for the survival or prosperity of the culture, a form of spiritual or cultural rebirth. Some have even speculated that this destruction may have been tied to a belief in cosmic cycles, where the fire symbolized a cleansing or purging of the old to make way for the new. Yet, there are those who consider more speculative ideas. Could there have been a more cataclysmic event behind the repeated burning of these cities? A widespread natural disaster, such as an enormous volcanic eruption, or even an extraterrestrial influence, as some fringe theories suggest, could have caused such widespread destruction. While these ideas remain highly speculative, they remind us that the Cucuteni-Trypillia people lived during a time when the forces of nature were still mysterious and often deadly. Could the cities have been subjected to such forces, leaving behind the inexplicable evidence of fire and abandonment? As we study these burned cities, we are left with more questions than answers. The Cucuteni-Trypillia culture was one of the most advanced of its time, with complex social structures, a sophisticated understanding of agriculture, and stunning artistic achievements. Yet, despite their advancements, they repeatedly allowed their cities to be consumed by fire, only to rebuild them and do so again. Was this a cultural ritual, or was it something darker, something we have yet to fully understand? The mystery of the burned cities of the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture endures, offering us a haunting glimpse into a people whose legacy is marked by destruction and rebirth. As we continue to search for answers, we can't help but wonder, what drove these people to build, burn, and rebuild in such a cyclical pattern? And perhaps more troublingly, what might have caused them to disappear entirely, leaving only the ashes of their once great cities behind? As we step back into the Neolithic age, nestled in the heart of modern-day Turkey, we come upon a site that has both fascinated and baffled archaeologists for decades: Çatalhöyük. This ancient settlement, which dates back to around 7,500 BC, is one of the largest and most well-preserved examples of early urban life. A sprawling city of tightly packed mud brick houses, some constructed in clusters so close together that people could walk across rooftops, Çatalhöyük is an extraordinary window into the past. Yet, for all its wonders, there is an unsettling mystery at its core. Why was it abandoned? At its peak, Çatalhöyük housed thousands of people. The homes, though simple in design, were rich with cultural and spiritual significance. Inside, archaeologists have uncovered intricate wall murals, depictions of bulls, humans, and abstract symbols. These paintings, along with the remains of carefully buried ancestors found beneath the floors, suggest that the people of Çatalhöyük had a complex relationship with death, ritual, and the afterlife. The settlement's design, with its labyrinthine alleyways and roof entrances, also indicates that its people were highly organized, living in close-knit, almost communal environments. Yet, despite the apparent success of this society, the city was mysteriously abandoned around 5700 BC. There are no signs of invasion, no evidence of destruction, no sudden catastrophic event that might explain the city's collapse. Instead, the abrupt departure of its inhabitants seems to have been a decision made without clear reason, as if the people simply left, vanishing into the winds of time. Mainstream scholars propose several theories for the abandonment of Çatalhöyük. One possibility is that environmental factors may have played a role. The region around Çatalhöyük was once fertile, but over time, changes in climate could have caused the land to become less hospitable for farming. A gradual decline in agricultural productivity might have led the population to seek more sustainable areas. However, no evidence of widespread environmental disaster, such as drought or flooding, has been found, leaving this theory somewhat speculative. Another more intriguing theory points to social factors. The people of Çatalhöyük lived in tight quarters, and as the population grew, it's possible that the strain of living in such close-knit, overcrowded conditions led to social unrest or a breakdown in communal structures. With no clear division of labor or leadership, and with an apparent reliance on shared resources, the stresses of maintaining such a society could have eventually led to its unraveling. Could internal conflict or a sudden shift in social dynamics have driven the people to abandon their once thriving city? There is also the possibility that the abandonment of Çatalhöyük had a more symbolic or ritualistic basis. The art and murals found within the city speak of spiritual beliefs deeply tied to the land and the ancestors. Some theorists suggest that the people may have abandoned the city as part of a religious or cultural ritual, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. The practice of burying the dead beneath the floors of homes, coupled with the symbolic importance of bulls and other creatures in the artwork, hints at a deeply spiritual worldview. Could the abandonment have been tied to a collective decision to leave the city behind in search of new spiritual meaning or a new beginning? More speculative ideas venture into even more uncharted territory. Some have suggested that the people of Çatalhöyük could have been influenced by forces beyond their understanding, perhaps driven to abandon their homes due to external factors such as a supernatural event or an encounter with unknown entities. While these ideas remain firmly within the realm of fringe theory, they raise the question, could there be elements of Çatalhöyük's abandonment that we are simply not equipped to understand with our current knowledge of history and human behavior? As we reflect on the enigma of Çatalhöyük, the most striking aspect of its abandonment is how little evidence exists to explain it. This was a culture that, by all accounts, was thriving. They had mastered early urban planning, developed intricate artistic traditions, and built a society that appeared to have the infrastructure to support its population for generations to come. Yet one day, they simply vanished, leaving behind a city frozen in time. The reasons for the sudden departure of the people of Çatalhöyük remain unresolved, and the site itself stands as a silent witness to the mystery. What drove these people to leave behind a thriving, sacred city? Was it a slow, internal decline, a sudden, unspoken decision, or something else altogether? As we search for answers, the abandonment of Çatalhöyük continues to linger in the shadows of history, a haunting reminder of how little we truly understand about the forces that shape civilizations. Perhaps, in the end, the most profound question is not simply why they left, but what was left behind, not just in the city, but in the hearts and minds of its people. What truths about their world, their beliefs and their lives might still remain hidden beneath the layers of time? The vast, unrelenting expanse of the Sahara Desert, once a thriving cradle of ancient civilizations, now stands as a stark reminder of nature's power to both sustain and erase life. Stretching across North Africa, the Sahara is one of the harshest environments on Earth, where scorching heat during the day gives way to freezing nights. But millennia ago, the Sahara was not the barren wasteland it is today. It was a lush, green landscape with rivers, lakes, and a rich diversity of flora and fauna, providing the perfect environment for ancient civilizations to flourish. One of the most intriguing mysteries of the Sahara is the disappearance of the civilizations that once thrived in its heart. The evidence of these ancient cultures, particularly the Neolithic Saharan civilizations, lies scattered across the desert. Carved stone tools, elaborate rock art, and remnants of sophisticated settlements, some dating back to 10,000 BC. But where did these people go? And what caused the sudden collapse of these vibrant societies? In the central Saharan region, sites like Nabta Playa in southern Egypt offer a glimpse into the lives of early Saharan peoples. The large stone structures here, thought to be used for astronomical and ceremonial purposes, are older than the pyramids of Egypt, suggesting a deeply sophisticated understanding of the stars and the cosmos. Further south, in what is now Chad, a series of ancient lakes once supported large communities, where people lived off the land and developed complex cultural practices. Evidence of burial sites, pottery, and symbolic artwork points to thriving societies that were intricately connected to the land. But then, somewhere between 5000 BC and 3000 BC, everything began to change. A slow but steady desertification process began to take hold of the Sahara, gradually transforming the region from a fertile paradise into the dry, arid desert we know today. But was this the sole reason for the disappearance of the Saharan civilizations? Or was there something else, something far more enigmatic, at play? Mainstream historians and geologists often cite climate change as the primary driver for the collapse of these civilizations. As the climate grew drier, the once abundant lakes and rivers began to dry up, making agriculture increasingly difficult and forcing communities to migrate toward the Nile River or other more hospitable regions. But even this explanation doesn't fully account for the suddenness of the collapse. The transition from a fertile Sahara to a desert took thousands of years. Why then did the civilizations disappear so quickly, seemingly without warning, when the environmental changes were gradual? Some researchers have suggested that the disappearance of the Sahara's ancient cultures may have been influenced by other factors. The desertification, while devastating, might not have been the only cause. Could there have been other, more mysterious forces at play, such as social upheaval, internal conflict, or a collapse of trade networks? Could a combination of climate change, resource scarcity, and the shifting balance of power among regional tribes have caused these once thriving societies to suddenly collapse into oblivion? The theory of an ancient lost civilization in the Sahara is one that has long captured the imagination of fringe theorists. Some suggest that there may have been a highly advanced society in the Sahara long before recorded history, a civilization capable of monumental achievements. Could they have developed technologies that allowed them to survive in the harsh conditions of the desert? Did they leave behind clues that we have yet to fully decipher, hidden beneath the sands? While mainstream archaeology dismisses these ideas as speculative, the sheer scale of the ancient remnants found throughout the Sahara raises intriguing questions. Were these people truly as advanced as they seem? And then there are the more speculative theories, ones that delve into the realms of mystery and the unknown. Some have even suggested that the people of the Sahara were not driven away simply by climate, but by an external event, perhaps an ancient cataclysm, like a massive volcanic eruption or even an asteroid impact, which could have disrupted their environment in a far more abrupt and dramatic way. Though there is no conclusive evidence for such events, the idea that something catastrophic may have been involved lingers, especially when considering how quickly entire regions appear to have been abandoned. What remains certain is that we have only begun to scratch the surface of understanding the fate of these ancient Saharan peoples. The remnants of their once great cultures lie buried beneath the sand, waiting to be uncovered. But for now, the reasons for their disappearance remain elusive. Did they leave in response to environmental pressures? Or did something more mysterious, something beyond the reach of our current understanding, cause their sudden vanishing? As we consider the evidence left behind in the desert, we are forced to ask, what more might we uncover, hidden beneath the shifting dunes? Could the key to understanding the disappearance of the Sahara's ancient civilizations still lie waiting just beneath the surface? Or, like so many lost peoples of the ancient world, have their secrets been buried too deep for us to ever fully comprehend? The Sahara holds its mysteries close, and perhaps some are meant to remain forever in the dust. In the arid expanse of southeastern Iran, nestled along the banks of the Halil River, lies an ancient city whose name has been lost to time, Jiroft. For millennia, it lay forgotten beneath the layers of desert sands, its secrets hidden from the world. But in the early 2000s, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon something that would shake the foundations of ancient history, a sprawling city rich in artifacts, architecture, and evidence of a once thriving civilization. What they uncovered was not only unexpected, but deeply mysterious. The Jiroft civilization, as it is now called, is one of the most enigmatic ancient cultures ever discovered, shrouded in mystery, with its origins and purpose still largely unknown. At first glance, the discovery of Jiroft seems almost surreal. There, in the heart of the Iranian desert, archaeologists unearthed the remains of vast city complexes, complete with grand public buildings, intricate carvings, and monumental structures, evidence of a highly sophisticated society that once thrived long before the rise of Mesopotamia or even ancient Egypt. The city, believed to have been active between 3000 BC and 1800 BC, reveals an advanced understanding of urban planning, metallurgy, and artistry. The artifacts found at the site are equally remarkable. Finely crafted pottery, stunning stone seals, and intricate sculptures that suggest a people with complex social and religious practices. What truly sets Jiroft apart from other ancient civilizations, however, are the mysterious symbols and inscriptions that adorn many of the artifacts. Some of these symbols resemble nothing found in known writing systems, leading many scholars to speculate that the Jiroft people may have developed an entirely unique form of writing, one that, like the civilization itself, remains largely undeciphered. The intricate patterns on seals and clay tablets suggest a deep, symbolic meaning, perhaps related to religious or ceremonial practices, but without a key to unlock their significance, these symbols remain an enduring enigma. As archaeologists continue to explore the site, they have uncovered evidence suggesting that Jiroft was not just an isolated small culture, but part of a much larger network of trade and influence stretching across ancient Persia, the Indus Valley, and even into Mesopotamia. The high-quality goods found in the city, such as lapis lazuli and carnelian, point to an extensive trade network, but the civilization itself is curiously absent from the historical record. Why, then, does such a prosperous and far-reaching society leave behind no clear mention in the annals of history? Theories abound about the rise and fall of Jiroft. Some believe that the civilization was part of the broader Elamite culture, an ancient group that controlled much of southwestern Iran. Others suggest that Jiroft was its own distinct entity, perhaps even a precursor to later civilizations in the region. The abrupt disappearance of the Jiroft civilization, much like the burning of the Cucuteni-Trypillia cities or the collapse of other ancient cultures, adds a layer of mystery. There are no clear records of warfare, natural disasters, or other external factors that would explain its fall. Was it the result of internal strife or a slow decline due to environmental factors like drought, as some scholars speculate? Or did the civilization vanish due to a more sudden catastrophic event, one that we are yet to fully understand? More speculative theories suggest that the Jiroft civilization may have been destroyed or abandoned due to a dramatic shift in the region's political or cultural landscape. Could the city have been overtaken by a rival power, or were there internal conflicts that led to its collapse? The lack of substantial evidence for such explanations, however, makes it difficult to draw definitive conclusions. One particularly intriguing theory is that Jiroft was a victim of its own success, an early example of a culture that became too complex or too interconnected for its own good. Could the thriving trade routes and cultural exchanges that the Jiroft people fostered have ultimately led to their undoing? In a time when such ancient networks were fragile, it's possible that the collapse of trade, the loss of resources, or even shifts in regional power dynamics could have brought the civilization to its end. Alternatively, could there have been a more cosmic force at play, something beyond the control of these people? There are some who speculate that natural disasters, such as a great flood or an earthquake, may have been the catalyst for the civilization's disappearance, although there is little concrete evidence to support these claims. What makes the Jiroft civilization so haunting is the silence that surrounds it. Despite the wealth of material evidence, pottery, tools, intricate seals, and monumental architecture, their story remains untold. How did they live? What were their beliefs? Why, after creating such a rich culture, did they vanish without leaving behind any written record of their existence or their downfall? As we continue to explore the ruins of Jiroft, one question looms larger than all the rest. What else remains hidden beneath the sand? With each new excavation, we find a deeper, more complex story waiting to be uncovered. But for now, the civilization of Jiroft remains a haunting mystery, a testament to a forgotten people whose legacy may still hold secrets waiting to be revealed. In the barren expanse of Egypt's southern Sahara, where the desert stretches endlessly beneath an unrelenting sun, lies one of the most enigmatic and oldest megalithic sites in the world, Nabta Playa. Hidden away in this desolate landscape, a series of stone structures and monuments stand as silent witnesses to an ancient people whose identity and purpose remain largely shrouded in mystery. Thought to date back to around 5000 BC, these structures offer an extraordinary glimpse into the deep history of human ingenuity, yet they pose a question that has perplexed archaeologists and historians for decades. Who were the builders of Nabta Playa, and what drove them to create these intricate, almost cosmic monuments? As you stand at Nabta Playa, the first thing you notice is the sheer vastness of the site. The stone circles, aligned with the stars, are scattered across the desert like forgotten sentinels, their weathered surfaces etched with time. The largest structure, a megalithic circle, stands at the heart of the site, its stones arranged in a precise manner, seemingly pointing to the rising sun and stars. There are also smaller stone structures and even large stelae, stone slabs that once bore inscriptions, though much of their meaning has been lost to time. Together, these formations suggest that the people who created them possessed a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and geometry, far ahead of what was previously believed possible for a culture of this period. Nabta Playa predates the Great Pyramids of Giza by over 1,000 years, and its alignment with celestial bodies suggests that the builders of this site had a remarkable grasp of the stars, the cycles of the moon, and perhaps the fundamental movements of the earth itself. But who were these people? And why did they dedicate so much time and effort to creating these complex stone structures in the middle of the desert? Most mainstream scholars agree that Nabta Playa was likely used as a ceremonial or ritualistic site, possibly serving as an astronomical observatory or a location for religious practices tied to the stars and the natural world. The alignment of the stones with the solstices and the positions of certain stars implies that the people who built Nabta Playa had advanced knowledge of celestial movements, which they may have used for agricultural purposes, such as determining planting seasons. Yet, this theory leaves open questions about the true significance of the site. Was it purely functional, or was there a deeper, more spiritual purpose at play? The more we dig into the history of Nabta Playa, the more questions arise. The stone structures appear to be intentionally designed with an astronomical purpose, which suggests that the builders had a level of sophistication in their understanding of the cosmos. But why did they choose such a remote location, far from the fertile banks of the Nile River, where other ancient civilizations were flourishing? Could there have been a different reason for the construction of these stones? A reason lost to the ravages of time and the unrelenting desert winds? Some researchers have speculated that Nabta Playa was built by a civilization whose influence stretched across regions now considered disparate. Could the builders have been part of an ancient culture that spanned both the Nile Valley and the deserts of the Sahara? If this is the case, the site could be a symbol of a far-reaching network of early cultures who shared knowledge and beliefs that we have yet to fully comprehend. Others have proposed that the builders were a nomadic group, perhaps using Nabta Playa as a sacred space for their journeys across the desert, where they could orient themselves using the stars. The most speculative theories, however, venture into the realm of the truly unknown. Some fringe ideas suggest that the site was not just an astronomical observatory, but a place of higher knowledge, perhaps even a portal to another world or dimension. These theories are often dismissed by mainstream scholars, yet they continue to linger in popular culture, fueled by the sheer mystery of the site's precise alignments and the lack of definitive understanding of the builders' motivations. What stands out most about Nabta Playa is how little we truly know about the people who created it. No written records have been found, and there are no obvious indications of who they were, where they came from, or what drove them to construct such monumental works in the middle of an inhospitable desert. Some have even suggested that the builders of Nabta Playa were part of an even earlier, now lost civilization, a civilization that predated all known ancient cultures and whose knowledge may have been passed down through generations before disappearing entirely. As we reflect on the strange and awe-inspiring structures of Nabta Playa, one undeniable fact remains. This place holds secrets, and many of them are still beyond our grasp. The stones stand as silent sentinels, untouched by time and wear, yet their true meaning continues to elude us. Were they a reflection of a people's deep spiritual connection with the stars? Or was their purpose far more complex, something we may never fully understand? And, perhaps more hauntingly, could there be other forgotten, mysterious sites out there, waiting to be uncovered? Places where ancient knowledge and celestial wisdom lie buried beneath the sands, just beyond the reach of modern understanding. The builders of Nabta Playa may have long since disappeared, but their legacy lingers in the stones they left behind, stones that continue to challenge our assumptions and spark our imaginations. In the vast and arid landscape of northern Mesopotamia, the ancient city of Tell Brak lies as a testament to a forgotten world. Its once thriving streets now stand in silence, covered by the dust of millennia. Yet, amid the ruins, some of its most unsettling and mysterious relics are the so-called eye idols, strange haunting figures that have fascinated archaeologists and scholars since their discovery in the early 20th century. These idols, carved from limestone, stand only a few inches tall, their features exaggerated and unnervingly human. But what sets them apart from typical ancient statues is their eyes. large, round, and deeply inset, with no visible pupils or detailed facial features. Instead, their eyes are marked by a wide, unblinking gaze that seems to stare into eternity, and the rest of their faces remain rudimentary, almost childlike. In total, over 30 of these idols have been found at Tell Brak, mostly buried beneath the ruins of what once was one of the region's most important urban centers. The eye idols are thought to date back to around 3000 BC, during a time when Tell Brak was emerging as a center of power in the ancient Near East. Their purpose and meaning, however, remain anything but clear. Early interpretations suggested that these idols were representations of deities, perhaps linked to the moon or celestial forces, with their large eyes symbolizing the all-seeing power of a higher being. But even this theory does little to unravel the deeper mystery of their role in the society that created them. The first questions that arise when confronted with the eye idols are the most basic. Why were they made? What did these strange, oversized eyes represent to the people of Tell Brak? Unlike many other ancient figurines, these idols do not seem to depict any specific gods or kings. Instead, they evoke an eerie sense of the unknown, a sense of something more primal and inexplicable. One theory posits that the eye idols could have served as protective talismans, intended to ward off evil spirits or to safeguard a community by embodying the all-seeing vigilance of a deity. Given the location of Tell Brak, which served as a major trade hub and was surrounded by rival city-states, it's not unthinkable that such idols could have had a ritualistic function, placed in temples or homes as symbols of divine protection or authority. However, there are other, more speculative ideas that suggest the eye idols might have served a different, even more enigmatic purpose. Some have proposed that the large, expressive eyes could symbolize the act of seeing into the spiritual realm or contacting divine forces. Could these figures have been part of a shamanistic practice? Were the people of Tell Brak engaging in rituals to transcend the physical world, to see beyond the veil of reality and glimpse into a world of spirits or gods? This idea is compounded by the fact that the eyes themselves appear unnatural, almost alien in their exaggerated proportions. Could the eye idols be linked to a form of proto-psychic belief, a spiritual tradition where seeing or being seen by a divine or supernatural entity was of paramount importance? The idea that the figures represent an attempt to interact with otherworldly forces remains one of the more mystical interpretations of the idols. Yet, there is another, darker possibility. In contrast to their assumed spiritual or protective purposes, some theorists have speculated that the eye idols may be representations of a societal elite, figures whose power and influence were defined by their ability to see or control the masses. If these idols were indeed associated with political power, could they have been tools of intimidation, meant to impress or subdue the population through the symbolism of omnipresence? Perhaps the eyes were meant to convey the idea that the ruler or priesthood had the ability to oversee and control everything, their vision extending across both the physical and spiritual worlds. What is most unsettling, though, is how little we truly know about the people who made these idols. We know that Tell Brak was a city of considerable importance, with evidence of early urbanization, trade, and complex social structures. Yet, despite the abundance of material culture, pottery, seals, and architectural remains, there is still no written record from this time that can offer insight into the meaning of the eye idols. The idols, in their haunting simplicity, seem to stand in stark contrast to the rich complexity of the civilization that produced them. This absence of written language, at least at the time the idols were created, makes the eye idols all the more mysterious. What role did these figures play in the rituals or daily life of the people of Tell Brak? Were they purely symbolic, or did they have a more practical, ritualistic function that we can no longer comprehend? And perhaps most intriguing of all, why did this particular form, this specific representation of the human face become so prominent? Was it an enduring symbol, something the people of Tell Brak felt compelled to create? Or were these eyes somehow inspired by a shared vision, a collective understanding of the world that has since been lost to history? As we examine the legacy of the eye idols, one thing is certain: they offer more questions than answers. Each idol, with its wide, unblinking gaze, seems to be holding a secret that has yet to be revealed. And as the sands of time continue to shift over the ruins of Tell Brak, we are left to wonder, what hidden truths lie in the eyes of these ancient figures? What knowledge, lost to millennia, still waits to be uncovered? In the marshy plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers converge, lies one of the oldest and most significant cities of the ancient world, Eridu. Once a thriving metropolis, this city is now little more than a collection of ruins, submerged in the depths of time and obscured by the shifting sands of history. But for centuries, Eridu stood as a beacon of early civilization, a place where the gods were believed to walk among men, and where the foundation of human culture itself was laid. Eridu's history stretches back to the very dawn of urban life. It is often regarded as one of the first cities in human history, possibly founded as early as 5400 BC. The city's name, which means home of the gods in Sumerian, suggests that its people believed it to be a divine center, a sacred place where the first steps toward organized society were taken. At the heart of Eridu stood the Abzu, a massive temple dedicated to the god Enki, the deity of water, wisdom, and creation. This temple, with its towering ziggurats and intricate carvings, symbolized the city's spiritual significance, while its expansive canals and agriculture-based economy reflected its material wealth. For centuries, Eridu thrived as a major cultural and religious center in ancient Mesopotamia. Its influence spread across the region, and it is often credited with the rise of Sumerian civilization. The city's urban planning and religious practices set the tone for many of the great Mesopotamian cities that followed. Yet, despite its early prominence, Eridu's fate remains one of history's most perplexing mysteries. How did a city so deeply entwined with the gods and so central to early civilization collapse and vanish from the historical record? Archaeological evidence points to a gradual decline in Eridu's prosperity, but the causes of its collapse are still debated. One of the most widely accepted explanations is environmental. The region's complex system of irrigation, which had once turned the marshlands into fertile farmland, may have eventually led to ecological ruin. Salinization of the soil, caused by over-irrigation, could have rendered the land infertile, driving the people away. The once bountiful waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, essential for agriculture and daily life, may have receded or become too polluted to sustain the population. But while environmental factors may have contributed to the city's decline, they don't fully explain why Eridu, this once vibrant city, was so completely abandoned. Over time, many Sumerian cities experienced environmental challenges, yet few vanished as completely as Eridu. Why did this city, with its profound spiritual significance and its early cultural achievements, fade so abruptly? Was it simply a natural progression, or was there something more at play? Some scholars suggest that the collapse of Eridu may have been part of a larger regional shift, one involving political and social upheaval. As new powers arose in Mesopotamia, such as and Uruk, the once dominant influence of Eridu may have been overshadowed. Conflicts between city-states, resource competition, and shifting alliances may have contributed to its fall. But even this explanation raises further questions. Was Eridu's abandonment a peaceful retreat, or was it the result of invasion, internal strife, or violence? And then there are the more speculative theories, ones that delve into the realm of the truly unknown. Some fringe historians and theorists suggest that Eridu's decline might have been tied to something more dramatic, a sudden cataclysmic event, perhaps even a natural disaster like an earthquake or a flood. Could a cosmic event, such as a meteor strike or volcanic eruption, have altered the course of history for Eridu and its people? While there is no concrete evidence to support these theories, the complete disappearance of the city, so sudden, so complete, leaves a space in our understanding where the possibility of something more extraordinary still lingers. Intriguingly, Eridu's abandonment also aligns with the larger historical arc of Mesopotamian civilization. The city, once the heart of Sumer, was eventually eclipsed by new centers of power. As other cities rose to prominence, Eridu's significance waned, and it was eventually forgotten by those who came after. However, the city's story remains, preserved in the dust and ruins, a reminder of a time when humankind first began to forge cities, laws, and religious systems. Yet for all that we know about Eridu, its history, its temple, its importance to early civilization, much remains shrouded in mystery. The true reasons for its collapse, the fate of its people, and the final days of this once great city remain beyond our reach. Was it merely the inevitable result of environmental strain and political change? Or was there something more, something deeper, that caused the people of Eridu to abandon their sacred city? The answers are lost to time, buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, waiting for the day when, perhaps, they will be uncovered once more. As we reflect on the story of Eridu, we are left with a profound sense of mystery. What happened to the gods' home, the cradle of civilization? What hidden truths, lost in the depths of time, might still lie waiting to be discovered, offering us a glimpse into the final moments of one of humanity's first great cities? Nestled in the rugged landscapes of Brittany, in northwestern France, lies one of the most captivating and enigmatic archaeological sites in the world, the Carnac Stones. Stretching across more than 12 kilometers of land, this vast array of standing stones is a testament to a civilization long forgotten, its true purpose remaining a mystery despite centuries of study. The site, which dates back to around 3,300 BC, is home to over 3,000 megaliths, massive stone pillars that form alignments, circles, and other mysterious patterns. But why were these colossal stones placed here, in such a remote and windswept corner of the world? As you approach the Carnac Stones, the first impression is one of awe and wonder. The stones rise from the earth like silent sentinels, their weathered surfaces smooth from centuries of exposure to the elements. Some stand in neat rows, perfectly aligned with one another, while others form tighter clusters or solitary markers scattered across the fields. The sheer scale of the site is overwhelming, and the sight of so many megaliths stretching out across the land in an almost otherworldly precision evokes a sense of something ancient, powerful, and unknown. The most widely accepted theory suggests that the stones were erected as part of a ceremonial or religious purpose, possibly linked to the lunar or solar cycles. Their alignment with the sunrise and sunset, as well as their proximity to natural landmarks, suggests that they may have functioned as astronomical markers. Some believe they were used to track the movements of the moon. Others posit that they were part of rituals tied to fertility, death, or the passage of time. The positioning of the stones, especially the long rows of standing stones known as alignments, is so precise that it's clear these were not random constructions. There was intent behind their arrangement. Yet, despite these mainstream theories, the true purpose of the Carnac Stones remains elusive. What did the people who built these structures truly believe? And why did they go to such great lengths to arrange these stones with such exactitude? Was it simply an astronomical observatory, a way to mark the passage of time? Or could it have served a much more profound and mysterious function? Some suggest that the stones may have been part of a larger spiritual or ritualistic tradition, perhaps a place for ancestral worship or a gathering site for community ceremonies. Given the isolation of the site, it seems likely that the people who built the Carnac Stones were deeply connected to their surroundings, using the stones to create a symbolic bridge between the earthly realm and the divine. Their exact function could have ranged from a form of communication with the gods to a ritualistic space that allowed for connections with the spirits of the land. Theories become even more speculative when considering the possibility that the stones were not merely markers, but something far more profound, perhaps even supernatural. Some have suggested that the Carnac Stones might have had a ritualistic role in connecting the physical world with other realms. The alignment of the stones with celestial bodies and natural landmarks may have served as a way for the people of the time to influence or commune with these forces, perhaps even a form of magic or a method of invoking divine powers. The idea that these stones were more than just objects, but part of an ancient practice that transcended the physical world, lingers in the back of our minds. The most intriguing and perhaps unsettling theory, however, lies in the belief that the stones may have had a far more esoteric purpose, a purpose so alien to modern understanding that it remains almost beyond comprehension. Some fringe theories propose that the stones were part of an ancient civilization's efforts to channel cosmic energy, align the Earth's ley lines, or even connect to extraterrestrial forces. These ideas often dwell in the realm of the mystical and unexplained, with no concrete evidence to back them up, yet they continue to intrigue those who look at the Carnac Stones with an open mind, wondering if these structures were more than just monumental markers. Could they have been tools used to tap into forces far beyond human comprehension? What is certain is that the Carnac Stones, in all their silent grandeur, still hold a profound mystery. The alignment of the stones with celestial events and their precise placement across vast stretches of land suggests a sophisticated understanding of both the earth and the sky, an understanding that we may never fully grasp. The origins of the people who built the stones are equally elusive. They left no written records, and their culture remains largely shrouded in obscurity. Were they a lost civilization, one whose knowledge has long since been forgotten? Or were they part of a larger cultural network, connected with other megalithic societies across Europe, from Stonehenge in England to the Standing Stones of Scandinavia? As we stand before the Carnac Stones today, it is impossible to ignore the weight of their mystery. What purpose did these stones serve? Were they simply a reflection of early human attempts to understand the natural world, or did they embody something far more profound, tapping into the very fabric of the universe itself? The stones still stand, silent and enduring, and perhaps, one day, they will reveal their secrets. But for now, they remain an open question, a reminder of the vast unknowns that still lie hidden beneath the surface of our shared history. As the sun sets over the vast plains of ancient Mesopotamia, a city of staggering power and influence once thrived along the banks of the Euphrates River. That city was Uruk, a metropolis whose rise to dominance in the 4th millennium BC marked the dawn of urban civilization. Known as one of the earliest true cities in history, Uruk was a cultural and political hub that expanded far beyond its walls, influencing vast stretches of the region. But the story of how Uruk's influence spread so quickly, its rapid expansion across a wide and diverse landscape, remains a mystery that has puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. At its peak, Uruk was a city of unmatched grandeur. Its walls, some 9 kilometers long, enclosed an urban center teeming with life, surrounded by monumental structures, intricate temples, and sprawling marketplaces. The city was also home to the famed ziggurat of Anu, dedicated to the sky god Anu, and the temple complex of the goddess Inanna, a central figure in Sumerian religion. The ingenuity of Uruk's architecture, the sophistication of its governance, and the extent of its trade networks mark the city as one of the most important cultural and political centers of its time. But the real mystery begins with Uruk's astonishing expansion. Within just a few centuries, Uruk's influence stretched across southern Mesopotamia and into neighboring regions. How did such a city, one that had only recently emerged from a small settlement, manage to rapidly extend its reach over such a vast area? What fueled this sudden surge in power, and what methods did the people of Uruk use to spread their culture, language, and influence? These questions have been the subject of much speculation. One of the most common explanations for Uruk's rapid rise is the development of new technologies, particularly in agriculture. With the advent of irrigation techniques and the ability to control the flow of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, Uruk's inhabitants could produce a surplus of crops, enabling the city to support a growing population. This surplus also allowed Uruk to become a major trading center, with goods flowing in and out of the city, linking it to distant regions. The establishment of trade routes likely played a crucial role in the city's expansion, facilitating cultural exchange and the spread of Uruk's influence across a wide area. Yet, while the agricultural and trade-based explanations for Uruk's expansion seem plausible, they do not fully account for the city's extraordinary speed of growth. After all, many other ancient cities had access to fertile lands and traded goods, but none achieved the same rapid and widespread influence as Uruk. What set this city apart from the others? Some theories suggest that Uruk's political and religious systems may have played a critical role. The city was ruled by powerful priests and kings who likely wielded immense authority. Could the religious and cultural prestige of Uruk have been used to convince neighboring cities and tribes to join its sphere of influence, whether through diplomacy, coercion, or conquest? The city's temples, with their monumental architecture and religious importance, could have served as symbols of power, drawing people into Uruk's orbit. Additionally, Uruk's development of writing, specifically cuneiform, allowed for the dissemination of laws, religious texts, and commercial transactions, giving the city a bureaucratic advantage that helped it consolidate its power over a larger territory. Another theory points to the influence of warfare and conquest. As Uruk grew in power, it likely engaged in military campaigns to expand its territory. The military might of Uruk, supported by its advanced technologies, such as the chariot, could have been a significant factor in its ability to expand so rapidly. Yet, despite this possibility, there is little direct evidence of large-scale warfare in the early phases of Uruk's expansion. This leaves the question open. Was Uruk's expansion more the result of diplomacy and cultural influence, or was it achieved through military dominance? Some fringe theories take a more speculative approach, suggesting that Uruk's rise might have been aided by external forces, perhaps even from far beyond the region. Could there have been influences from distant civilizations, or even from extraterrestrial sources, that played a part in Uruk's extraordinary leap in power? While these ideas lack strong evidence, the sheer scope and speed of Uruk's expansion invite such questions, as scholars continue to search for explanations that might bridge the gaps in our understanding. Despite the various theories, what remains clear is that Uruk's expansion was not a simple or straightforward process. It was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that involved technological, political, cultural, and possibly military factors. However, the true nature of Uruk's rise, whether it was driven primarily by the brilliance of its people or by forces that remain beyond our current comprehension, remains an open question. As we continue to study the ruins of Uruk, we are left with a compelling mystery. What was the true engine behind Uruk's rapid expansion? Was it the brilliance of its agricultural innovations, the strength of its political leadership, or something far more enigmatic? The answer remains elusive, hidden beneath the dust of time and the layers of history. And perhaps, in the end, it is this very mystery, the the question of what drove one of the earliest and most powerful cities in the ancient world to spread its influence so far, that makes Uruk's story all the more fascinating. In the arid landscape of northern Mesopotamia, near the site of a long-forgotten city, lies an unsettling reminder of a time when humanity's conflicts turned violent on an unprecedented scale. The site is Tell Brak, a small settlement in what is now modern-day Syria, and it is here that some of the earliest evidence of large-scale warfare was uncovered, evidence that would forever alter our understanding of early human society. The excavation of this site in the late 20th century revealed the remains of a once thriving settlement, its walls and structures suggesting a peaceful agricultural community. However, buried beneath these foundations, hidden in the layers of history, lay signs of something far darker, the unmistakable traces of violent conflict. As archaeologists sift through the dust, they uncover skeletal remains bearing the unmistakable marks of blunt force trauma. There are bones with arrowheads embedded in them, and skulls fractured by blows from blunt instruments. The evidence points to a sudden, brutal invasion or internal strife that tore apart this once thriving community. But this discovery raises more questions than answers. How could a peaceful, agricultural society so quickly descend into violence? What triggered such a profound shift from cooperation to conflict? The evidence at Tell Brak marks a pivotal moment in human history, a moment when the scale of warfare expanded beyond isolated skirmishes or small-scale raids. The remains suggest that this was no random act of violence. It was part of a larger pattern of organized warfare. The scale of the destruction, the sophistication of the weaponry found, and the strategic nature of the attack point to a level of coordination and planning that had not been seen in earlier, smaller conflicts. This marks the emergence of large-scale, organized warfare, something that would only grow in complexity and intensity over the millennia. But what led to this shift? Some scholars suggest that the rise of sedentary agricultural societies in the Near East, with their fixed settlements and increasingly valuable resources, may have set the stage for conflict. As people began to accumulate wealth in the form of stored food, livestock, and tools, they created valuable targets for those seeking to expand their territory or seize control of those resources. The concept of territoriality began to take hold, and with it came the idea of defending one's land and wealth. What had once been a cooperative agricultural community now found itself in a struggle for survival. Others propose that the evidence from Tell Brak could point to a broader societal change. As early urban centers began to grow, so too did the concept of social hierarchy and power. Political structures became more defined, and with that came competition between competing groups. Conflict, once rare and often rooted in individual disputes, became institutionalized and organized. The rise of leaders or warlords, armed with the power to mobilize and direct large groups of people, could have led to the first instances of state-sponsored warfare. But then there are more speculative theories that suggest external forces may have played a role. Some fringe historians believe that the advent of large-scale warfare was not just a product of human evolution and resource competition, but that it could have been influenced by more extraordinary forces. Was there an unknown, perhaps external, catalyst that sparked this shift in human behavior? Some even suggest that the rise of violence and organized warfare could have been connected to dramatic environmental changes, such as the end of the last ice age, which may have displaced communities and led to territorial conflicts. The fact remains that warfare on this scale did not arise spontaneously. There must have been a culmination of factors, technological, environmental, social, that together set the stage for the dramatic shift in human conflict. But the true causes remain elusive. While we can infer that the rise of organized warfare was linked to the rise of agriculture, resource control, and political power, there are still questions that linger in the shadows of history. Why did these early communities, once marked by cooperation and exchange, so quickly descend into violence? Was it the inevitable consequence of growing inequality, or was there something deeper at play, something that remains hidden beneath the surface of time? As we continue to piece together the evidence of these early conflicts, we are left with more questions than answers. The violent events at Tell Brak are a stark reminder of how quickly human society can be transformed by the forces of war. And as we look further back into prehistory, we may wonder, what other secrets lie buried, waiting to reveal the true origins of our most destructive impulses? The mystery of large-scale warfare, its origins, its causes, and its ultimate consequences, remains one of the most profound and unsettling enigmas of human history. The early temples of Mesopotamia, awe-inspiring in their design and towering in their ambition, were not only places of worship, but also of power. These grand structures, often dedicated to the gods of Sumer, Akkad, or later civilizations, were centers of both religious and civic life. But behind the hallowed walls of these ancient buildings, there was also a darker history, one marred by sudden and violent destruction. In the heart of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers cradled some of the earliest human civilizations, monumental temples arose as symbols of divine favor and political might. The ziggurats, towering pyramids made of mud brick, dominated the landscapes of cities like Uruk, Nippur, and Babylon. These structures were considered the earthly dwellings of gods, where priests and rulers sought to communicate with higher powers. Yet, despite their grandiosity, many of these sacred spaces met an untimely and violent end, burned to the ground, left to smolder in the ruins of a city's shattered dreams. Among the most compelling and chilling discoveries are the remnants of temple burnings in the ancient city of Ur. The site of Ur, once a thriving metropolis at the center of the Sumerian world, was home to some of the most impressive temples of its time. Excavations of the great ziggurat, dedicated to the moon god Nana, revealed layers of charred remnants, indicating that the structure had once been set ablaze. The question that immediately arises is, why? What could have led to such a deliberate act of destruction? Was it a result of a failed religious devotion, a political upheaval, or something more mysterious? Archaeological findings suggest that the destruction of these temples wasn't just a sporadic event. It was part of a recurring pattern in early Mesopotamian history. Evidence of temple burnings appears throughout the ancient world, from the rise of Sumerian cities to the decline of Babylon. Burnt offerings, once a form of tribute to the gods, were now replaced with the smoke of entire buildings going up in flames. These acts of violence against sacred spaces raise disturbing questions about the nature of power, religion, and conflict in early Mesopotamia. Theories abound as to why these temples were destroyed, and the answers remain elusive. One possible explanation points to political unrest. In a world where divine favor was directly tied to a ruler's legitimacy, the destruction of a temple could signal the collapse of a regime. Could it be that these temples were set on fire as a statement of rebellion, a way to strip a king of the divine protection that temples symbolized? Some scholars suggest that in times of instability, especially during the fall of dynasties, temples became targets of both political and religious retribution. Yet, the mystery deepens when we look at the broader pattern of temple burnings across Mesopotamia. Was this destruction merely symbolic, or did it serve a more practical purpose? One theory suggests that these fires were part of ritualistic purification, an attempt to cleanse a sacred space or a community of its sins. In the ancient world, fire was often seen as a purifying force, a way to rid a place of corruption and impurity. Perhaps the people believed that by burning down their temples, they were wiping away the sins that had brought about misfortune or divine displeasure. Alternatively, Could the destruction have been a response to outside forces? Mesopotamia was a region constantly beset by invasions and migrations. Assyrian, Elamite, and later Persian armies swept through the land, leaving destruction in their wake. Some have speculated that temple burnings were not the work of the people themselves, but of invading forces, an act of erasing the cultural and religious identity of a defeated city. If this theory holds weight, it paints a chilling picture of religious erasure as part of conquest, where the act of setting fire to temples was not just about taking control of land, but also about eradicating the very soul of a civilization. Then there is the more speculative theory that draws upon the ancient world's fascination with the divine and the supernatural. Some have posited that these fires were not the result of human conflict at all, but instead the product of an enigmatic ritual linked to cosmic events. Did the people of Mesopotamia believe that these fires were a sign of divine intervention? Was there something about the burning of a temple that could summon divine favor, or perhaps fulfill some kind of sacred prophecy? Such questions remain unanswered, but they reveal the depth of mystery surrounding these acts of destruction. One of the most haunting aspects of these ancient temple burnings is the sheer scale of the violence involved. The fires that consumed these sacred spaces were not small, isolated events. The charred remains of wooden beams, burnt stones, and soot-blackened walls testify to the ferocity of the destruction. In some cases, entire complexes were destroyed, leaving only the ruins as evidence of their once grand presence. And yet, despite the violence of the fires, many of these ruins remain remarkably well preserved, offering us a glimpse into the past that raises even more questions. Could it be that these temple burnings were an act of vengeance against the gods themselves? In the ancient world, rulers and priests were often believed to hold a divine mandate, and a king's ability to maintain the favor of the gods was seen as essential for his rule. But what if the people began to lose faith in their leaders and their gods? Could the burning of temples be a way to reject the very system that had ruled over them, an act of defiance against both king and deity? The possibility that these fires were, in part, a statement against the divine order is both chilling and thought-provoking. While the exact reasons for the temple burnings in early Mesopotamia remain elusive, the archaeological evidence provides us with a haunting reminder of the fragility of civilization. In an age where religion and politics were inseparable, the destruction of a temple was no mere act of physical violence. It was an attack on the foundation of society itself. The ruins of these burned temples now stand as silent witnesses to the turmoil that once gripped these ancient cities, and to the mysteries that remain hidden beneath their ashes. What then can we truly know about the forces that led to these temple burnings? Were they acts of political rebellion, spiritual purification, or something more enigmatic? Perhaps we will never know the full extent of the motivations behind these ancient fires. But as we continue to study the ruins, to sift through the charred remains of the past, we are reminded of how much remains hidden in the sands of time, how much we have yet to understand about the ancient forces that shaped the history of Mesopotamia. The earliest human sacrifices are one of the most unsettling aspects of ancient history, rituals that speak to both the power and the desperation of early civilizations. As we dig deeper into the past, it becomes clear that the act of human sacrifice was not only a solemn religious ritual, but also a means to assert control, mark significant transitions, and appease the gods. The evidence for these early practices is scattered across different regions and civilizations, leaving behind fragments of a story that are as chilling as they are mysterious. In the highlands of Peru, the bones of children and adults alike were found buried beneath the sacred ground of the ancient site of Huanchaquito Las Llamas. The remains were unearthed in the early 2000s, and their discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The bodies, meticulously arranged in what seemed to be ritualistic poses, revealed a practice that stretched back more than 1,000 years. But what makes these sacrifices particularly disturbing is not just the method of their death, but the fact that they were likely chosen for their symbolic purity, as the youngest and most vulnerable members of society. The mass sacrifice of young people in ancient Peru is a stark reminder that the practice was not limited to one region or civilization. Evidence of human sacrifice has been found across the globe, from ancient Mesopotamia to China, from Mesoamerica to Africa. What compelled these ancient peoples to offer up their fellow humans in such a terrifying and ritualistic way? Was it merely a reflection of religious devotion, or did these sacrifices serve a more complex societal function? At the heart of the mystery lies the discovery of human sacrifice in the early days of Mesopotamian civilization. Excavations at sites such as Ur, one of the world's first great cities, have uncovered the remains of individuals who met violent ends. While some of these deaths were clearly linked to warfare, others appear to be ritualistic in nature. The so-called royal tombs at Ur, discovered in the 1920s, revealed an unsettling scene. The bodies of dozens of attendants, seemingly sacrificed to accompany their king in the afterlife. The remains of these individuals were often found in the same tombs as their rulers, their lifeless forms carefully arranged and placed with deliberate precision. But what does this tell us about the role of sacrifice in early Mesopotamian society? Some archaeologists believe that these individuals were willing participants, chosen to serve the king in the afterlife, a form of devotion so extreme that it transcended death itself. Others suggest that these individuals were unwilling victims, sacrificed in a final act of loyalty to their king or their gods. The bones of these sacrificed attendants tell a different story, though, one of violence and force. Was this a ritual meant to symbolize the king's power, or was it a darker statement about the lives of those who lived under his rule? It is important to note that these early sacrifices were not always tied to the death of a king. In other instances, human sacrifice may have been used as a form of appeasement during times of war or drought. The practice may have been an attempt to placate the gods, to demonstrate the community's devotion, and to ensure divine favor. Sacrifices might have been carried out during periods of social upheaval or when disaster loomed. The need for supernatural intervention, whether to guarantee the success of a harvest or to stave off a military defeat, may have driven ancient peoples to offer their most precious commodity, human life. In ancient China, the practice of human sacrifice can be traced back to the Shang dynasty, 1600 to 1046 BC, with evidence of such rituals found in tombs and royal burial sites. The most famous examples of this practice come from the ancient city of Anyang, where archaeologists have uncovered the remains of humans, often buried with their rulers or placed in ceremonial pits. Some of these victims were clearly selected for their high social status, while others were probably prisoners of war, chosen for their symbolic value as a representation of the enemy. These sacrifices may have served several purposes: to accompany the dead in the afterlife, to provide offerings to ancestors, or to demonstrate the power of the ruling class over life and death. There is also evidence to suggest that human sacrifice during this period was tied to divination. Rituals were performed to invoke the spirits of the dead and seek guidance from the gods, and the human sacrifices may have been seen as a way to enhance the efficacy of these rituals. But in the case of human sacrifice in the Shang dynasty, there is also a haunting sense of what might have been lost. These sacrifices were often conducted on a massive scale, with victims buried in elaborate ceremonies. The sheer volume of human remains, found in large pits near the royal tombs, suggests that these acts were not isolated events, but part of a broader and sustained cultural practice. What did the rulers of the Shang dynasty believe they were gaining through these offerings of life? Was it an assertion of divine favor, or was it something darker? a way of demonstrating their complete control over their people and the natural world. The evidence for human sacrifice, particularly from the ancient world, is at once fascinating and chilling. But the true nature of these practices is still the subject of intense debate among scholars. Was it religion, political power, or something more complex, a mix of both? What was the psychology behind offering human life as a gift to the gods or a means of cementing the power of the ruler? Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of early human sacrifice is not just the manner in which it was carried out, but the deep cultural significance attached to it. Across the globe, societies that practiced human sacrifice seem to have shared a belief in the importance of blood, a tangible connection between the human realm and the divine. But this obsession with blood also raises disturbing questions about the value placed on human life. If life itself could be so easily offered up to the gods, what did that say about the way these ancient societies viewed themselves? What kind of society could carry out such violence on their fellow humans? And what were they hoping to gain from it? As we search for answers in the fragments of ancient burial sites, royal tombs, and sacrificial pits, the practice of human sacrifice remains an enigma. Could it be that we are only scratching the surface of a ritual that was much more widespread, far more complex, and much more deeply ingrained in human culture than we realize? The earliest evidence of human sacrifice speaks to something primal and terrifying, yet it also offers a glimpse into the motivations and beliefs of our distant ancestors. But as we continue to peel back the layers of history, we are left with the question, why did these ancient peoples feel the need to offer human life in the service of their gods, their kings, or their beliefs? And what does that tell us about the lengths to which humans have always been willing to go in their pursuit of power, knowledge, and divine favor? In the remote corners of the ancient world, rituals emerged that both fascinated and horrified those who discovered their traces millennia later. One such practice, the plastering of human skulls, offers an unsettling glimpse into the beliefs and customs of early societies. These skulls, carefully treated, covered in layers of plaster, and adorned with intricate details, are more than just curious remnants. They are echoes of a world long vanished, where the boundaries between life, death, and the supernatural were blurred. The earliest examples of this practice come from the Neolithic period, around 7000 BC, in what is now the Levant and parts of the ancient Near East. In places like Jericho, the ancient city that dates back thousands of years, archaeologists have uncovered what appear to be deliberately preserved human skulls, altered with layers of plaster, pigment, and sometimes shells or stone to create eyes. These are not just bones left behind in tombs. They have been deliberately transformed, crafted with care and precision. But why? What were these ancient peoples trying to communicate through such disturbing rituals? The process itself is both labor-intensive and symbolic. The skulls, carefully cleaned and treated, were often molded with layers of plaster that were then smoothed over to create a lifelike appearance. These plastered skulls were sometimes painted with pigments or adorned with shells to serve as eyes, and in some instances, human hair was attached to the skulls, further enhancing their eerie realism. Some of the skulls even have small features carved into them, like nose and ear structures, adding to their almost haunting lifelike quality. What makes this ritual even more perplexing is the fact that these skulls were not buried or hidden away, but were often displayed, revered, and kept within the household or community. They were clearly not simply remnants of the dead, but objects of veneration, possibly used in religious ceremonies or as a part of ancestor worship. The plastering of the skull may have served as a way to preserve the memory of the deceased, but it also raises the question, were these individuals being revered as something more than just ancestors? Were they seen as still living, still part of the community? One theory that has been proposed is that these plastered skulls were a form of ancestor worship. perhaps the remnants of a belief that the deceased continued to exert influence over the living. By preserving and displaying these skulls, the living might have believed they were ensuring the continued presence of the dead within their lives, or seeking to invoke the deceased's favor or guidance. It's possible that these skulls were treated as sacred relics, perhaps even as oracles of some sort, through which the living sought communication with the spirits of the departed. The painstaking care with which these skulls were preserved suggests that they were far more than mere objects of death. They were symbols of a connection to the supernatural world. However, the precise meaning behind the plastered skulls remains unclear, and many questions continue to surround the practice. Were they created for ritual purposes or as a form of memorial? Were they believed to have some supernatural power, or were they simply a symbol of familial continuity? Archaeologists have long debated the possible significance of these skulls, but no definitive explanation has emerged. Theories about their use vary. Some researchers believe these skulls were part of funerary practices, designed to preserve the individual's memory and to protect the soul in the afterlife. In a way, they may have been intended to bring the deceased back into the community, allowing them to continue to guide or protect their loved ones. This is not an entirely foreign idea in human history. Other cultures, from ancient Egypt to the Maori of New Zealand, have practiced forms of ancestor worship, where the deceased play an active role in the lives of the living. Others have speculated that these skulls were used as symbols of power or authority. In some cases, the skulls seem to have belonged to individuals of high status, or were possibly the heads of those who had played a significant role in their communities. In these cases, the plastered skull could have served as a kind of ancestral badge of power, a way of connecting the living ruler to their spiritual ancestors and of reinforcing their own authority. The method by which these skulls were preserved also raises significant questions. If we accept that these rituals were related to ancestor worship, we must also consider how these individuals came to believe that such an act was necessary. Could it have been a response to some trauma or disruption? Perhaps a form of memorialization after death had caused severe social upheaval? The complexity and effort involved in creating these plastered skulls suggest that they were not casual rituals, but instead deeply ingrained in the culture's spiritual or political life. The mystery deepens when we look at the varying distribution of these skulls across different regions. While the earliest known examples are from Jericho, similar practices have been uncovered in other parts of the ancient Near East, from modern-day Palestine to Turkey. The common thread among these distant regions is the strikingly similar method of skull preservation. Yet, no one can fully explain how or why this practice spread so widely. Was there a shared belief system that spanned across these early civilizations? Or was the practice independently discovered in different places at roughly the same time? One theory that has intrigued researchers is the idea that the plastered skulls might have been tied to the notion of fertility. In some ancient cultures, the skull, especially when it was preserved and displayed, might symbolize rebirth or the continuation of life. By maintaining the head, the most important part of the body, the community may have believed that they could ensure the fertility of the land, the animals, and even the people. This ritualistic act could have been as much about ensuring the survival and prosperity of the living as it was about honoring the dead. The mystery of the plastered skulls is not just about the past, but about what these rituals tell us about the human need to connect with death, the supernatural, and memory. What does it mean that these ancient peoples saw fit to preserve the skulls of the deceased in such an elaborate, detailed way? Why was it so important to maintain a link with the past, to bring the dead into the present through the act of preservation? And more significantly, what might this practice reveal about the ancient view of life and death? Were these skulls simply markers of a culture's respect for the deceased, or did they serve as a way to keep the dead alive in the consciousness of the living? Were these individuals seen as guardians, Or were they viewed as something more ominous, standing at the threshold between life and death, the known and the unknown? As we delve further into the mystery of the plastered skulls, we are left with more questions than answers. What did these practices reveal about early human beliefs? How did they shape the societies that adopted them? And perhaps most importantly, what secrets might these eerie, preserved skulls still hold? Secrets that could offer a glimpse into the ancient mind, where the living and the dead were never truly separate? Along the banks of the Nile, where the land stretches wide and the river winds through millennia of history, a quiet enigma persists, one that challenges our understanding of Egypt's ancient origins. The mysteries of the pre-dynastic period are still being unraveled, revealing structures that hint at a highly developed society far earlier than previously believed. These forgotten remnants, scattered across the Nile Valley, may hold secrets that challenge the very foundations of Egypt's rise to prominence. As the sun dips below the horizon, the desert's cool shadows slowly envelop the land, and you might find yourself standing before one of these ancient sites, sometimes little more than jagged stone foundations or half-buried walls protruding from the shifting sands. Yet these modest remains, when examined closely, speak volumes about the complexity of the civilization that built them. Many of these structures predate the famous pyramids by thousands of years, stretching back to a time when Egypt was not yet unified, and its people were still in the midst of forming their earliest cultural identities. One of the most intriguing areas where these structures are found is at Nabta Playa, a site located in the southern Egyptian desert. Here, stone monuments and massive megaliths lie scattered in patterns that suggest an understanding of the heavens, time, and the movement of celestial bodies. The stone circles and alignments, some dating as far back as 5000 BC, are thought to be the work of a pre-dynastic people, potentially predecessors of the later pharaohs. What drove these early Egyptians to create such complex, monumental structures, and why were they constructed in this remote desert location? The arrangement of stones at Nabta Playa is no accident. They are deliberately placed in patterns that appear to track the movement of the sun and stars. This suggests that these early builders had a sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, knowledge that would eventually be used to align the Great Pyramids with the stars. But what we still don't know is how these ancient people came to this understanding, or why they chose to build these structures where they did. Was Nabta Playa a place of ceremonial importance, a ritual center that later civilizations would only begin to grasp in the form of more recognizable monuments? Or was it a precursor to the elaborate construction techniques that would eventually be perfected in the reign of the pharaohs? What is truly striking about these early structures is their distinct lack of relation to the more well-known monumental works of the pharaohs. There are no inscriptions, no grand tombs, and no obvious signs of the large-scale, wealth-driven projects that came later. Instead, we find simple but masterfully arranged stones, carefully set in precise positions, as though these people were reaching out to the stars or trying to harness the power of the natural world around them. This creates a fascinating paradox. These early Egyptians were deeply connected to their environment, yet there is little evidence to suggest they sought to glorify themselves or their rulers in the way later dynastic Egypt did. Similarly, the mysterious structures found near Hierakonpolis, a site that flourished during the pre-dynastic period, challenge our assumptions about the early Egyptians. Hierakonpolis was once a powerful center in Upper Egypt, and its remnants include early examples of monumental architecture, walls, platforms, and foundations that seem to predate the grand palaces and temples of the later dynasties. Some of the structures at Hierakonpolis are thought to have been ceremonial or religious in nature, possibly related to the worship of early gods. But what purpose did these structures serve in the pre-dynastic world, and what do they reveal about the political and spiritual practices of the time? Despite the grandiosity of the monuments found at Hierakonpolis, there is no sign of the opulent wealth that would come to define Egypt's later dynasties. There are no vast tombs or lavish burial chambers, and the nature of the power structures that built these sites remains obscure. Archaeologists are still debating whether these early monuments were associated with a centralized leadership, or if they were the product of smaller regional chieftains, each with their own claim to power. The lack of clear signs of a unified kingdom suggests that the Egypt we know today, the one of pharaohs and massive pyramids, might have been a late development, emerging from a more fragmented, decentralized society. As we move further down the Nile, we encounter another mystery, one that rests beneath the surface of the soil at sites like Tell Brak. Here, archaeologists have uncovered what appear to be the remnants of massive stone platforms, which could represent some of the earliest examples of complex urban planning. But what is most striking about these structures is their unexpected nature. These are not the kind of monumental works we associate with later Egypt. Instead, they resemble much older forms of architecture seen in other parts of the ancient world, places like Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley. What can we make of these early Nile structures? Why did they arise in the first place, and why do they often bear such a mysterious resemblance to structures found elsewhere? Could there have been contact or cultural exchange between these early Nile peoples and distant civilizations? Were the ideas of monumental architecture and complex urban planning shared across distant cultures, or was the knowledge of such designs passed down through generations and adapted independently in different regions? In the case of Tell Brak, the evidence is inconclusive, but it raises interesting questions about how ideas and technologies were exchanged, or perhaps developed simultaneously, across different parts of the ancient world. These early Egyptians may have been influenced by the innovations of the ancient Near East, just as they themselves might have contributed ideas to later cultures in Africa and beyond. But we can never be sure, because the historical record is fragmentary, and the connections between these distant cultures remain elusive. The lack of clear answers is part of the mystery that surrounds these ancient pre-dynastic structures. Were these sites, like Nabta Playa or Hierakonpolis, part of a larger, interconnected network of early civilizations? Or were they isolated experiments in monumental construction? Did these early Egyptians have a shared belief system? And if so, how did that belief system shape their construction practices? Or were these isolated regional developments, each with its own set of customs, beliefs, and social structures? What's particularly fascinating is the possibility that these structures were not just physical representations of power or religion, but also spiritual or astronomical tools. The alignment of stones at Nabta Playa and other sites suggests that these early peoples were deeply attuned to the cosmos, perhaps seeking to understand the cycles of the moon and stars, or even attempting to control the forces of nature. Could these pre-dynastic Egyptians have been attempting to manipulate the universe itself, or were they merely marking the passage of time and the rhythm of the earth? As we continue to explore the mysteries of the Nile's early structures, we are left with more questions than answers. The more we uncover, the more we realize how much remains hidden beneath the surface. What other ancient sites, buried in the sands or lost to time, hold the secrets to a civilization that rose long before the pyramids? And how much more can we learn about the early Egyptians, who crafted these monumental structures with such careful intention, yet left behind so few clues to explain their meaning? The answers may be waiting for us, buried in the sands, obscured by time, but for now, the true purpose of these early Nile structures remains one of Egypt's most compelling mysteries. As we shift our focus to the ancient lands of Anatolia, a region that stretches across modern-day Turkey, we step into a land rich with history, a history shrouded in enigma. Anatolia, once a cradle of civilization, witnessed the rise and fall of several cultures, each leaving behind remnants that tell us much, but often without the clarity we crave. The story of the early Anatolian cultures is one of flourishing cities, advanced art, and mysterious disappearances. Among them, one question lingers. Why did these civilizations, some of the earliest known in human history, disappear so suddenly? The ancient city of Hattusa, once the mighty capital of the Hittite Empire, stands as a testament to Anatolia's grandeur. Its massive stone walls, still impressive today, suggest a civilization at the height of its power and sophistication. Yet, as we look closer, we begin to wonder about the fate of the people who once lived here. The Hittites, a people known for their advanced knowledge of warfare and politics, left behind impressive texts, monumental architecture, and a thriving culture. But as the centuries passed, the Hittite Empire crumbled, and Hattusa was abandoned. What caused this? And was it only the Hittites who vanished from Anatolia, or were there other cultures whose fate remains just as mysterious? To understand the disappearance of early Anatolian cultures, we must first examine the landscape itself, a place where empires rose and fell over the millennia. Anatolia, with its fertile lands and strategic location between Europe and Asia, was home to many of the ancient world's most influential cultures, from the early Hittites and Phrygians to the Luwians and Urartians. Each culture left behind evidence of their sophisticated societies, including intricate pottery, tools, inscriptions, and fortifications. Yet, despite this evidence, their ultimate fate remains elusive. The first significant mystery comes from the ancient site of Çatalhöyük, one of the world's oldest urban centers. Located in the heart of Anatolia, Çatalhöyük flourished between 7,500 BC and 5,700 BC, long before the rise of the great cities of Sumer or Egypt. The site is known for its dense, interconnected houses, decorated with vibrant murals and statues, offering a window into the spiritual and everyday lives of its inhabitants. But despite its cultural richness and advanced organization, Çatalhöyük suddenly ceased to exist. No clear explanation has been found for its abandonment. Was it destroyed by an invading force, or did the inhabitants leave for reasons we can only guess at? Some archaeologists have speculated that environmental changes, such as the depletion of local resources or shifts in climate, may have played a role. Others suggest that social upheaval, possibly related to religious or political changes, could have driven people away from the settlement. The silence of its final days continues to haunt the site. But Çatalhöyük is not the only ancient Anatolian city to have mysteriously disappeared. In the nearby region of Phrygia, the city of Gordion stands as another puzzle. Gordion was once a powerful center of trade and culture, home to the legendary King Midas, whose name has become synonymous with wealth. The city, famous for its monumental burial mounds or tumuli, appears to have fallen into decline around the same time as other Anatolian cultures. Excavations at Gordion have uncovered evidence of violent destruction: burned buildings, charred remnants of walls, and broken pottery. Was Gordion the victim of an invasion? Or did internal strife and war lead to its collapse? The mystery remains unsolved, and the fate of its people continues to elude us. As we explore further, we come to the city of Troy, made famous by Homer's Iliad and its tales of war and betrayal. Troy, located in what is now northwestern Turkey, was a thriving city during the 2nd millennium BC. Archaeologists have uncovered multiple layers of destruction at the site, each one hinting at violent ends. Was Troy destroyed by the Greeks in the epic conflict described by Homer, or did it fall victim to more local, regional warfare? Or could it have been a combination of factors, perhaps a prolonged siege, combined with internal conflict that led to Troy's eventual demise? Each of these ancient sites, Çatalhöyük, Gordion, Troy, represents a culture that rose to prominence, only to disappear in ways that we can't fully explain. But they are far from the only examples. Throughout Anatolia, evidence of other lost civilizations can be found. Cities with no clear trace of their ultimate end. Societies that once thrived but left no clear legacy behind. And as we peer deeper into the past, we are faced with more questions than answers. What caused these early Anatolian cultures to vanish? Was it warfare, natural disasters, environmental collapse, or perhaps something more insidious? Some researchers have posited that climate change may have played a significant role in the fall of many ancient civilizations, including those in Anatolia. Shifting weather patterns, prolonged droughts, and changes in agricultural productivity could have led to food shortages, famine, and social unrest, all of which may have contributed to the collapse of these societies. But while the theory of climate change offers a compelling explanation, it remains speculative. Without definitive evidence, we cannot say for certain whether environmental factors played a role in the disappearance of these cultures. Another possibility is that these ancient civilizations experienced internal decay, political or social upheaval that led to the fragmentation of their societies. The Hittites, for example, were a highly organized and powerful people. Yet, when their empire began to unravel, it did so in a manner that is not entirely understood. Some historians suggest that the Hittites were the victims of a complex internal crisis, perhaps fueled by corruption, infighting, or instability. Others believe that the rise of external threats, such as the mysterious sea peoples who appear in several ancient records, could have hastened their downfall. Was this the fate of other Anatolian cultures as well? Still, there are those who look to more fringe theories, wondering if the disappearance of these early Anatolian peoples could be linked to something more mysterious. Could there have been an unknown external influence? Perhaps the arrival of a foreign, advanced civilization, or a group of people who disrupted the delicate balance of power in the region. Some suggest that knowledge or technology beyond the capacity of these societies could have led to their sudden collapse. Was there a lost civilization in the region, one that existed before the well-known ancient cultures of Anatolia, whose influence and disappearance remain hidden from us? The mysteries of the early Anatolian cultures and their sudden disappearances are far from solved. We can speculate about the causes, pointing to environmental factors, internal decay, or even outside forces. But each theory leaves us with more questions than answers. Were these cultures simply victims of time and circumstance? Or was there something more behind their sudden demise? As we walk through the ruins of Anatolia, from the ancient city walls of Hattusa to the enigmatic mounds at Gordian, we are reminded of how much has been lost to the sands of time. The stories of these civilizations, of their rise, their culture, their disappearance, remain buried in the earth, waiting for someone to uncover their secrets. But for now, the true fate of these ancient peoples remains one of history's most elusive and disturbing mysteries. What happened to the early Anatolian cultures, and what does their disappearance tell us about the fragile nature of human civilization itself? The answers may be out there, hidden beneath layers of earth and stone, waiting to be discovered. But until then, the mystery endures. The ancient site of Tell Brak, located in modern-day Syria, is an imposing testament to the long-forgotten world of early Mesopotamia. As you stand atop the site, the arid landscape stretches endlessly around you. The wind stirs the dust and sand, echoing with the whispers of an ancient past. At first glance, Tell Brak seems like a quiet, desolate place, an ordinary mound of earth, with a few broken walls and scattered fragments of pottery. Yet beneath the surface lies a disturbing mystery that has puzzled archaeologists for decades: the mass graves of Tell Brak. The story of Tell Brak begins over 6,000 years ago. It was once a bustling city, a center of trade and culture, and perhaps one of the largest settlements in the region at the time. The city flourished during the early dynastic period, reaching its peak around 3200 BC. The ruins that remain today offer a glimpse into a society that was sophisticated and complex. But what makes Tell Brak truly captivating and deeply unsettling are the mass graves that have been uncovered at the site. In the 1990s, archaeologists began excavating a series of large burial pits at Tell Brak, which seemed to contain the remains of many individuals. These were no ordinary graves. Unlike typical burials where bodies are placed with care, arranged with ritual, or buried with personal belongings, these mass graves were chaotic. The bodies appeared to have been thrown together without any apparent regard for respect or reverence. Some were buried face down, while others were buried with their limbs twisted and contorted in unnatural ways. The victims appeared to have been killed in a violent manner, and their bodies were hastily disposed of, as if the very act of burial was an afterthought. The scale of the graves is what makes them particularly chilling. Hundreds of bodies have been unearthed from these mass burial pits. The bodies were mostly of adult males, but there were also women and children among them. The exact number of individuals buried here is unclear, but it is estimated that the mass graves contain the remains of thousands. What could have caused such a large-scale and violent loss of life? And why was there such a disregard for the dead? One theory that has been put forward is that these graves are evidence of a sudden, catastrophic event, perhaps an invasion, a massacre, or even a civil war. Archaeologists have speculated that Tell Brak, like many ancient cities, may have fallen victim to external forces. But who would have attacked this thriving city, and what prompted such a violent response? The lack of clear evidence of weapons or other signs of battle has led some to question whether this was truly the result of an invasion or if something else was at play. Another possibility is that these mass graves were the result of internal strife. Did a rebellion or a political coup cause this violent purge of the city's inhabitants? Could these people have been victims of a ruthless ruler who disposed of his enemies with brutal efficiency? Some scholars have pointed to the social and political dynamics of early Mesopotamian cities, which were often characterized by factionalism and power struggles. It's possible that a violent conflict broke out within Tell Brak itself, leading to the mass deaths. This theory, however, remains speculative, as there is no definitive evidence linking the graves to a specific event or ruler. Perhaps the most disturbing possibility is that these graves were the result of ritual sacrifice. Early Mesopotamian societies were known to practice ritualistic violence in the name of the gods, and some scholars believe that the mass graves at Tell Brak could have been the result of such a ritual. In the ancient world, human sacrifice was sometimes seen as a necessary offering to appease the gods, ensure the prosperity of the city, or mark the end of a significant event. Was Tell Brak a victim of such practices? The idea of ritualistic sacrifice may seem far-fetched to modern sensibilities, but it was not uncommon in ancient Mesopotamia, where the line between religion and politics was often blurred. However, there is little direct evidence to suggest that the deaths in these graves were the result of sacrifice, and the theory remains one of many possibilities. As intriguing as these theories are, they only raise more questions than they answer. Was the violence at Tell Brak the result of an external attack, a rebellion, or a religious ritual? And if it was an attack, who were the perpetrators? Theories abound, but there is no definitive answer. The lack of written records from the time only deepens the mystery. The people of Tell Brak, like so many other early civilizations, left behind no clear explanation for their sudden collapse. Was their destruction a result of one catastrophic event, or was it the culmination of years of internal instability? In addition to the mass graves, excavations at Tell Brak have uncovered a wealth of other artifacts that hint at the complexity of the society that once lived there. Pottery, tools, and sculptures depict a culture with sophisticated art, trade, and technology. The city's layout, with its wide streets and monumental buildings, suggests a high level of organization and planning. Yet, for all its accomplishments, Tell Brak remains a haunting reminder of how fragile human civilizations can be. One moment, the city is thriving, its streets filled with merchants, artisans, and priests, and the next, it is reduced to ruins, its people buried in mass graves, their stories lost to time. The mystery of the mass graves at Tell Brak is not unique to this site alone. Similar graves have been found at other ancient sites across the Near East, hinting at a pattern of violence and upheaval that was not limited to this one city. What happened to these societies? Were they simply the victims of their own internal struggles, or was there something more sinister at play? Perhaps the most unsettling question raised by the mass graves at Tell Brak is this: how much do we truly understand about the ancient world? For all the advances of modern archaeology, there are still many mysteries that remain unsolved. What happened at Tell Brak all those centuries ago? Was it a massacre, a rebellion, or a religious ritual gone wrong? Or could it be something else entirely? A mystery that continues to elude us, hidden beneath the earth. As we stand over the mass graves of Tell Brak, we are reminded of the fragile nature of human civilization. In the grand sweep of history, empires rise and fall, leaving behind only the faintest traces of their existence. And sometimes, even those traces are obscured by the passage of time. The mass graves at Tell Brak are not just a record of a violent event. They are a symbol of all the mysteries of the past that we may never fully comprehend. What caused the violence at Tell Brak? What drove these people to such a horrific end? The answers remain buried, waiting to be uncovered. But for now, they remain one of history's most disturbing and terrifying mysteries. The earliest ziggurats, those imposing step pyramids that rise from the arid plains of Mesopotamia, stand as enigmatic monuments to an ancient civilization's ambitions, their purpose and meaning still debated by scholars today. These towering structures, made of mud brick and reaching for the heavens, seem to transcend time, holding within them secrets of a world long gone. As we look at these awe-inspiring ruins, we must ask, who were the builders of these first ziggurats, and what drove them to create such monumental structures? Among the earliest examples of ziggurats is the one found at Eridu, believed to be one of the world's first cities, nestled in the southern part of ancient Mesopotamia, in present-day southern Iraq. This was not simply a place of residence or commerce. Eridu, with its complex religious system, was a sacred site, an important pilgrimage destination in the early Sumerian world. But even more intriguing is the question, was the ziggurat at Eridu truly the first of its kind? The very idea of building such colossal structures seems to suggest a deeper connection between architecture, religion, and society, as though these monumental creations were not just buildings but symbols of a far-reaching belief system, something that transcended the physical world. The ziggurat at Eridu is thought to have been constructed during the early part of the 3rd millennium BC, at a time when the Sumerians were already developing one of the first known writing systems, cuneiform. But there's something curious about the origins of the ziggurat itself. The structures are described as temple complexes, often built with a large stepped core that led to a central sanctuary at the top, suggesting a vertical journey toward the divine. In many ways, the ziggurats acted as the earthly connection to the gods, an attempt to bridge the gap between man and the divine. But why such monumental efforts to reach the heavens? Could the motivation behind the construction of the first ziggurats be purely religious in nature? Given that Sumerians were deeply religious, attributing much of their daily lives to the favor of their gods, it is plausible that the ziggurats were intended as massive temples to appease and honor these deities. However, the sheer scale of the construction leads us to wonder, Was there something else driving this obsession with the divine? Was it perhaps a political statement, a way to project power, to solidify the status of the rulers who commissioned these constructions? The earliest ziggurats are part of a broader tradition of monumental architecture that marks the dawn of urban civilization in the ancient Near East. Yet, these structures were not simply about religious devotion. They were also about marking territory, identity, and power. The rulers of these cities, kings, priests, and chieftains, used the ziggurat as a symbol of their control over both the physical and spiritual realms. The size and grandeur of these temples must have been seen as an expression of the ruler's divine right to govern, an assertion that their rule was sanctioned by the gods themselves. But the mystery deepens further when we look at the other locations where similar structures arose. From the ziggurat at Ur to the massive complex at Babylon, the rise of these structures is a tale that spans centuries, and yet the origin of the design and the builders behind these early temples remains an open question. Who were the first to conceive of such ambitious projects? Were they the Sumerians, or did the knowledge and techniques of ziggurat building spread from another culture, now lost to time? It's difficult to say. Scholars have long debated whether the Sumerians were the true originators of the ziggurat, or if the concept was borrowed and adapted from earlier cultures. Some believe that the Sumerians were inspired by earlier, less grandiose structures, such as the platform mounds and stepped terraces found in the region. Others argue that the knowledge for such a complex architectural feat may have been handed down from even older, now unknown cultures who preceded the Sumerians in the region. If this is the case, what can we infer about the technological and architectural capabilities of those early societies? Could they have created such advanced structures, or was there something more to the ziggurat's design than meets the eye? Perhaps one of the most striking aspects of the ziggurats is the mystery surrounding their construction methods. The sheer scale of these temples, some rising as high as 70 feet, raises intriguing questions about how they were built. With no cranes or sophisticated machinery, how did the builders manage to transport and stack massive bricks, each weighing several hundred pounds? The construction of these towering structures must have been an immense logistical challenge. Was it possible that the knowledge for such feats was handed down over generations, perhaps preserved by an elite class of engineers or architects who guarded the secrets of their construction? Or were these structures the result of an ancient knowledge, passed down from a forgotten civilization? If so, where did this knowledge come from, and why did it disappear? The ziggurat at Ur, one of the most well-preserved examples of such structures, further complicates our understanding of these ancient feats of architecture. Built during the reign of King Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, the ziggurat at Ur is a massive structure that has survived the ravages of time. Its grand staircase, once an important feature of the temple, seems to ascend into the sky itself, a monumental symbol of divine connection. Yet, the precise details of its construction remain shrouded in mystery. What kind of manpower was needed to carry out such a colossal project? What role did religious leaders play in overseeing the work, and how were resources allocated to such an ambitious endeavor? As the centuries passed, the ziggurat design evolved, but its fundamental purpose remained the same: to reach the gods. However, with each passing generation, these monumental temples became more elaborate and increasingly disconnected from the people who built them. The shift in their architectural design, from simple to complex, raises questions about the changing relationship between the rulers and the ruled. As the ziggurats grew taller and grander, was the gap between the divine and the human growing wider as well? Was the ziggurat meant to symbolize not just the ascent to heaven, but the growing power of the elite over the masses? While the purpose of the ziggurats is generally accepted as being religious, temples to the gods, there remains an unsettling ambiguity around their true meaning and function. Did they serve as a focal point for the community, a place where the people gathered to worship? Or were they primarily tools of political power, serving as symbols of a king's divine mandate to rule? These questions may never be fully answered, as much of the evidence from that time has been lost to time, with only fragmented archaeological remains to provide us with clues. As we look at these ancient monuments, their purpose and builders remain elusive. But what if the answers lie hidden somewhere in the sands, waiting to be uncovered? What else could the ziggurats of Mesopotamia reveal about the ancient world? And what are we still missing from this fascinating and enigmatic chapter in history?